talk about failure. I'll begin with a story. A little over a year ago, a good friend of mine, Adrian, who's from Alaska, was home visiting his family. He was there for a few weeks, came back after the holidays, lives in New Haven. When he returned home, back to his apartment, he discovered that about 2 weeks before he'd arrived, a pipe had burst in his apartment, completely flooding the thing, destroying all of his furniture, most of his clothes, and really the entire apartment. So all of a sudden, he was out of an apartment, did not have a place to live. He also didn't have a job. He was sort of in transition. Reached out to a few friends. Right around this time, Brad and I were starting a new company called General Assembly, which is this educational campus and sort of community center for technology design and entrepreneurship in New York. We just signed a 20,000 square foot lease, building out this big space, classrooms and workspace and communal area, a big communal kitchen. And we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we had a little cafe where we could serve coffee? So we needed a barista. I knew Adrian had some coffee shop experience and done a little bit of food and beverage stuff. So we made our second hire of the entire company, Adrian, to come in to New York, save him from his sort of forlorn apartment, and come in and be our barista. He was staying in my couch. He didn't even have his own place to live. I said, come, stay with me, be a barista, you'll figure out what to do. He's coming in, started his job, and began researching food laws, health code, any sort of implementations, equipment that we'll need for the coffee shop in the space. And it turns out that there was actually no legal way, given the physical construction of the kitchen, the way that space was made up, that we could actually run any sort of coffee shop at all. So through his own research and through his own, the beginning of his job, he realized that he essentially had put himself out of a job. But the kid was living on my couch. We couldn't just fire him, and he was a good friend. So we had to figure out what to do. It was a failed hire. It was a failed experiment, and really it sort of backed us into a corner. And it was at that time that we had to explore new opportunities. We were forced to find something for Adrian to do at General Assembly. So we knew we wanted to start running events. We knew we would probably need some catering for those events. And we got him started. He started doing catering for events, started running food and beverage, then eventually started producing events, took over our entire event series, started producing hackathons, speaker series, panels. It was phenomenal. Now, a year later, he is producing multi-week courses, he's producing conferences, all of which are very central to the core business. And so it was through that moment of failure, that time when you had to sort of look yourself and look each other in the face and realize, well, that didn't work, we're gonna have to try something new. It was from there that we found the opportunity to give Adrian another path. And ultimately, it was that new path that led to much greater success than just sticking him as a barista in a coffee shop that never really worked out.
500 million years ago, single-celled organisms started producing proteins that detected light. Now, this wasn't the vision or eyesight that we know today, but it actually gave life its first sense of up and down, day and night, light and dark. Now, over the course of the next 500 million years, those proteins started aggregating in cells, and the cells diversified and sensed color and allowed us to see and paint in our minds the picture of the world that we see today. Now, this wasn't a linear process like I'm describing it. In fact, it happened through a series of random mutations iterated on over time. And I think someone once said that building or improving on a system through random mutations is like trying to fix your car by firing bullets through the hood. But because of those failures, and the vast majority of all the mutations during the development of the eye were failures, but some small number were successes. And those successes accumulated over time and built what we today know as the eye. An organ so complex and so intricate that some people actually use it as evidence that evolution could not possibly have happened. But it couldn't have happened without failure. And that's the importance of failure that Matt and I are talking about today.
So let's fast forward back into modern day. It's 2007. Everyone has eyes. They work pretty well for the most part. 2007, I was a sophomore here at Yale, Brad was a junior. We wanted to do something entrepreneurial. We wanted to start a startup. We started a company called GoCrossCampus, which was this sort of massively multiplayer, team-based, rivalry-oriented game. Very much sort of rooted in our experiences of college rivalries and residential colleges and Harvard, Yale, et cetera, et cetera. And we started this company, raised some venture capital, built out a team, had some early success. Eventually we hired some people. We had an office in New York, had some people out in California. And you know, the thing is with venture capital, we decided to take that on, and it was a risk. Because in any typical venture capital portfolio, let's say there's 10 investments, any venture capitalist knows that only maybe 2 of those 10 investments are going to be wins, right? Those are going to be exits or be successful or IPO or whatnot, maybe 2. The other 8, they assume they're going to fail. And when you take in venture capital, all 10 of those entrepreneurs in that portfolio assume that they are one of those 2. You don't go into it assuming, well, maybe this will work, maybe it won't, it probably won't. You truly believe that you are one of those special startups, the special entrepreneurs who's going to have that big win, that big success. For the next several years, really through the rest of my college career, GoCrossCampus was it was our life. It was a huge amount of work, a huge amount of passion that went into it. Every Friday, my senior year, I would take the Metro North from New Haven, get up early in the morning, take the Metro North into New York, work a full day at our office, pretend to be a sort of professional adult entrepreneur, and then that evening come back home, back to Yale and go back to being a college student. So this was a big endeavor for us and a big focus for us. 2008, 2009 rolled around. We had a pretty big staff. We were burning a lot of cash. We never really figured out how to make any money, which is an important part of running business, of course. The recession was in full force. We tried to raise another round of venture capital. Wasn't happening. By spring of 2009, we ran out of cash, never generated any significant revenue to speak of, had to close up shop, lay everyone in the company off. I think we were about 12 at that point, which sucked, by the way. I was graduating right at that time. Now, for the majority of my Yale career, I figured, okay, I'm starting this company, being an entrepreneur, that's awesome. I'm going to graduate and work full-time right out of school for my own startup. Who couldn't even think of anything better than that. But of course, that only works if you actually have a company that exists to work for, which by the time I graduated, it did not exist. So graduated, had no career plans, no job to speak of, moved to New York anyway, and that was again, speaking of these moments of failure, that was a pretty significant moment of failure. This thing that I've been working on and building for the last several years was now no longer, and I hadn't set up any sort of jobs or any sort of direct career prospects after that. So what did GoCrossCampus do? Well, it actually did some pretty important things. It gave us exposure to running and building a business. It was an opportunity to make all those first-time founder mistakes, and we made a lot of them. It brought us into a community of other entrepreneurs, other startups, other people who were also trying to create new ventures, trying to build something, sometimes failing, sometimes being successful. And it actually set the stage in a pretty incredible way for us to then go on and create our next venture, which turned out to be General Assembly. And looking back, General Assembly is doing pretty well right now, but there would be no way that we could have had the success that we're seeing in General Assembly had we not gone through the trials and tribulations and had the failure of GoCrossCampus. And it was that failure that really opened the new doors and set the stage for successful future endeavors down the line.
Before about 600 million years ago, there was very little oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. But life still evolved. There were still single-celled organisms that thrived off of the gases that were available on Earth at that time, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen, ammonia, etc. And those organisms actually excreted oxygen. And over the course of hundreds of millions of years, oxygen built up in the Earth's atmosphere until about 530 million years ago, it reached about where it is today. And at that time called the Cambrian explosion, the amount of life, oxygen-consuming life on Earth exploded. And most of the animals, plants, fungi, etc., most of the families of those organisms that we know today developed during the Cambrian explosion. Now, unfortunately, the development of oxygen and the accretion of oxygen in the environment condemned those earliest organisms to death. And now today they only exist in places like our guts and in volcanoes and places you wouldn't want to live. So those organisms failed, had to fail. Failure was a necessity to develop the kind of life that we have today. Another way to put that would be that early Earth was optimizing toward a local maxima rather than a global maxima. So let me explain a little bit what that means. So the best way to understand this is in, say, the topography of any space. Let's say this building. I'm on a local maxima right now because I'm up on stage and I'm here. If I wanted to be in a global maxima for the building, I would have to climb up on the roof and go 12 stories up. So it's important to understand that early Earth, for instance, was never going to get that far without actually being able to use oxygen. But in order to get to that point, in order to go for the global maxima and the life we have today, there had to be a failure of those early organisms. You had to pull back from the local maxima to really go after the global success. When I came to Yale 7.5 years ago, I really wanted to be a researcher in biology, but there was one problem. I was really bad at it. So I eventually, in not too long, found my real passion, which is starting companies. But I did learn some things from my time doing research in biology, and one is all these awesome sauce stories that I'm telling you guys right now. The other is that occasionally there is a necessity of failure, that repeated failures and the willingness to fail on a micro scale can open the door to wondrous things like eyes on a macro scale. And that necessity, that sense of the necessity of failure and the willingness to fail let me actually pursue my passion in a way I wasn't able to before.
One of the things Brad and I realized after the end of GoCrossCampus was the limitations of our own ability. Many entrepreneurs will tell you that in any sort of successful venture, looking back, it's hard to really separate what's skill and what's luck. And if you really look at it, there's so much to success. That sort of right place, right time, good idea, things worked out. It's actually very hard to say what's skill and what's luck and to draw a line between the two. Of course, if you look back on a failure, obviously neither are involved. Luck is obviously not on your side. And it's actually much easier to see your shortcomings, to see your limitations, to see what areas of improvement still stand ahead. And it's failure that allows you to know yourself most deeply. If you've never failed, if you've never loved and lost, if you've never had a passion and realized that due to your own shortcomings, you're not able to realize some grand idea, it's at those moments that you have a certain kind of catharsis. And so not only, whether in biology or entrepreneurship, not only is failure important, but it's absolutely necessary for progress. It's actually necessary for innovation. It's actually necessary for opening up new opportunities that you would not have even been able to conceive of if you just remained within the sort of risk-free, failure-free path that you always set on. But the interesting thing about all this is that you can't, as important as failure is, you can't try to fail. In business and entrepreneurship, there's no practice round. You're always performing. You're always sort of on stage. Everything is one-time shot, and then you see how that works out, and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, then you have to keep going. And if you say, well, maybe I'll just go into this, maybe I'll do a practice startup, I'll assume it's going to fail and I'll learn something from it, right? That's not going to work because you're not going to push yourself to your maximum. You're not going to actually understand your own capabilities and your own areas of improvement. You have to be willing to throw yourself 100% into something. You have to fully and resolutely believe that what you're working on, that what you're building, that what you're so passionate about is actually going to work. That is your achievement that is waiting to be realized. And if you fail, and assumingly you will, and assuming that happens, embrace that. Take that as an opportunity to learn about yourself, to learn about what went wrong, to motivate yourself, to go on to new opportunities, to change direction, to give yourself a new perspective. And then, after you've embraced that failure, at that point, you can go on to a higher plane of success. So good luck, and thank you.